Good morning, everyone. I'm Dr. Devina Krishna. I teach linguistics in the Department of English, Patna Women's College, India. And the topic of my presentation is Understanding Vulnerable Languages of India. These are the elements of my presentation. I'll talk about linguistic diversity in India, language families in India, scheduled languages, non-scheduled languages, the scenario of language endangerment, India's disappearing languages, vulnerable languages, the need of preserving India's linguistic diversity with a conclusion. Now, this is a quotation by Rabindranath Tagore. If God had wished, he would have made all Indians speak with one language. The unity of India has been and shall always be unity, diversity. Now, before I actually talk about linguistic diversity in India, I just want to say that Indian linguistic diversity has originated due to constant conflict, contact, and cohesion between migrants and locals. India represents almost 1369 mother tongues from various language families, according to the census 2011. And the age of the language families ranges from 5,000 to 7,000 years. One language family represented in the Andaman Islands is perhaps the oldest in the world. The members of this group are remnants of the first migration out of Africa that took place 70,000 years ago. And India has served as a major corridor of human migration in the history of human evolution. We all know that when we talk about linguistic diversity, so it actually refers to the concentration of unique languages together. And language itself is a means to communicate with one another in order to survive. It's a very important medium. It's a great vehicle for knowledge. It helps people with the proper knowledge to communicate with others. And India is a diverse country with so many languages. And the statistics are almost there in the on the slide. You can see that according to the census of India 2011, there were 121 languages with 1599 other languages. So it's very diverse. Now, the total number of speakers for each language also vary greatly. There are 14 languages with more than 10 million speakers, 32 languages with more than 1 million speakers. And most of the languages are spatially aggregated. That is, each of these languages is concentrated in a single state. So every state has its own language, its own regional language. Many states have their own official languages. Now, before I actually talk about, the state of endangerment or the various levels of endangerment, in which I'm going to talk about, the state of vulnerability also, which is my main topic, I would briefly throw light upon the major language families of India. So India is represented by 6 language families, and these are Indo-Aryan, Dravidian, Austroasiatic, and Tibeto-Burman in the mainland India. Then we have Great Andamanese in the Andaman Islands. And in addition, there are endangered languages of the Tai-Kadai group. So each of these language families is historically and typologically distinct from each other. So these are the language families. Once again, to recap: Indo-Aryan, Dravidian, Austroasiatic, Tibeto-Burman, Tai-Kadai, and Great Andamanese. So by the way, a lot of work has been done in the area of Great Andamanese. A lot of research has been done. And Professor Anvita Abbi, she's a very renowned scholar of linguistics. She has conducted a lot of research as far as the Great Andamanese language family is concerned. Let us talk about Indo-Aryan language group. So Indo-Aryan languages, also known as the Indic languages, are a subgroup of the Indo-Iranian branch of the Indo-European language family. We know that the Indo-European language family is the broader term. So within that comes the Indo-Aryan group. And it's a very heavily populated group. So in the early 21st century, Indo-Aryan languages were spoken by more than 800 million people, primarily in India, Bangladesh, Nepal, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka. So indeed, it's a very heavily populated branch among all other branches. And these are some of the languages that belong to the Indo-Aryan group. We have Hindi, Bangla, Urdu, Marathi, Punjabi, Gujarati, Odia, Bhojpuri, Maithili, Dogri, Kashmiri, Konkani, Mewati, Assamese, and Sinhala. So, as far as the other characteristics are concerned, so a chain of mutual intelligibility runs through Indo-Aryan languages from west to east and north to central India, with 2 points at the end of the chain unintelligible. And this chain is not applicable for either the Dravidian or the Tibeto-Burman languages. So next we come to the Dravidian group. So Dravidian is a family of languages spoken by 220 million people, mainly in southern India and northeast Sri Lanka, with pockets elsewhere in South Asia. Now, the Dravidian language family's four largest languages, so chiefly these are Kannada, Malayalam, Tamil, and Telugu, and they have literary traditions spanning centuries, of which Tamil reaches back the furthest. So, when we talk about the Dravidian language group, so they actually occupy the southern part of India. However, Kuduk and Malto, these are the two languages of the same family that are spoken in central India and are known as North Dravidian languages. And the term is reserved to include Brahui also, the only Dravidian language spoken in northwest Pakistan. So we have these major Dravidian languages. We have Telugu, Tamil, Kannada, Malayalam, Brahui, Dhangar. Then we have another language family, which is the Austroasiatic. Now, the Austroasiatic language family consists of 169 languages spoken in Southeast Asia, in countries located between China and Indonesia. So a few are spoken to the west of this area in the Nicobar Islands and in India. So the Austro part of the name comes from the Latin word for south. Now, let me also give you some further information that Austroasiatic languages are known to be the oldest, predating any other language family, except those represented in the Andaman Islands. So they consist of two major groups. Munda, represented in the central and east of India, and Mon Khmer languages, spoken in the northeast in Meghalaya Hills. And its sub-branch Mon Nico in the Nicobar Islands in the Indian Ocean. Then we have Santhali, which is a major Munda language listed in the 8th schedule, while Khasi occupies a prominent position among the Mon Khmer languages. Then we have Nicobarese languages with 5 varieties belonging to the Mon group. So it's a very old language family group. So these are some of the languages. We have Munda, Khasi, Bang, Pakanik, Vaitik, Katuik, and Bhanarik. Then comes the Tibeto-Burman language. And these are the non-Semitic members of these languages are the non-Semitic members of the Sino-Tibetan language family, over 400 of which are spoken throughout the highlands of Southeast Asia as well, certain parts of East Asia and South Asia. So these languages belong to actually the Sino-Tibetan language family, and they're spoken in the Himalayan ranges, stretching from northwest India to northeast India, and extending to other countries also like Nepal, Burma, and China. And this family has the most numerous and highly differentiated languages in its fold. So the languages of this family mark India for its linguistic diversity, as most of the languages of this family are mutually unintelligible. So in post-independent India, we find that varieties of contact Hindi have emerged in Meghalaya, Arunachal Pradesh, and Manipur. And these varieties bring various tribes together. And interestingly, each language of this group is written down, unlike the case with other tribal languages of the country. And this has been proved through a lot of research going in this area. So we have Tibeto-Burman, and these are some of the languages. We have Burmese, Tibetan, Nosu, Bodo, Meitei, Tamang, Bai, Garo, Jinfo. Then we have another group, Tai Kadai, which is a branch of the major Tai group of languages. And members of the Tai-Kadai language family evolved from an ancestral language called Proto-Tai, which is thought to have originated in the area between northern Vietnam and southeastern China. So we find that 2000 years ago, speakers of the Thai languages moved southward into Southeast Asia. And today, languages belonging to the Tai-Kadai language family are spoken by an estimated 85 million people in Southeast Asia, in an area extending from Thailand into Laos, Vietnam, China, Burma, and India. So we have the two national languages of the group, Thai and Lao, account for well over half the total of Thai Kadai speakers. So let me tell you that out of the 7 languages in its fold, we have Ahom and Nora, which have become completely extinct. That means there are no speakers left to speak the language. And the number of speakers in Ayatan, Khamiang, Pakial, and Pake make them endangered, leaving only Thai Kahamti spoken in Arunachal Pradesh as the only vibrant language. So we can see that the state is, or yes, of course, it is not very good, and languages are in the state of endangerment. We have Khamyang, Pake, Turum, Ayaton, Nora, as I said. Now, interestingly, comes the next language family, which is words knowing. So we have with us Great Andamanese, which is the recently discovered language family. So the Great Andamanese languages, these are a near extinct language family, once spoken by the Great Andamanese peoples of the Andaman Islands in India, Indian Ocean. And I've especially mentioned over here, I've already talked about Professor Ranvatabi, because her work on tribal languages and other minority languages or lesser known languages of South Asia has been phenomenal, and it is well known in the world. And her pioneering work on the highly endangered languages of the Andaman Islands has been received with great acclaim in India and abroad. And if I would just request the participants that if you really make some time for it, you can search on the website. You will find a lot of work worth knowing. Um, Great Andamanese, related to Great Andamanese grammar and all other work, which is worth knowing. So the Andaman Islands are broadly divided into two sets of groups. We have Andaman and we have Little Andaman. So Great Andamanese, it's a generic term representing 10 languages among a family of languages that were once spoken by 10 different tribes living in the north, south, and middle of the Great Andaman Islands. Present-day Great Andamanese, PGA, is a mixture of 4 northern varieties of the Great Andamanese languages, that is Jeru, Khora, Bo, and Sare. All right. Now, interestingly, this is, one of the songs that has been taken from Professor Anvita's work on Great Andamanese. And this is a song in the Great Andamanese language, and the translation in English has also been given. So it says, Le le purjo, le tokot koime, le purjo, le tokot koime. It means swinging up and down, ants on the tree falling down. Swinging up and down, ants on the tree falling down. Swinging up and down, swinging up and down. So you can have a look at the Great Andamanese song, and if you read the book, you'll find lots of songs and stories. Now let us talk about the scheduled languages. Now we know that the 8th schedule of the Indian Constitution consists of 22 scheduled languages, and these are, of course, I've mentioned the languages also that belong to the group of the scheduled languages. So we have Assamese, we have Bengali, Gujarati, Hindi, Kannada, Kashmiri, Konkani, Malayalam, Manipuri, Marathi, Nepali, Odia, Punjabi, Sanskrit, Sindhi, Tamil, Telugu, Urdu, Bodo, Santhali, Maithili, and Jogri. So these are the scheduled languages. Other than that, interestingly, The country also comprises of 1599 languages, most of which are dialects. So these are restricted to specific regions, as we know, and many of them are on the state or on the verge of extinction. So the state is not very, uh, not very, it's not a happy state because many are facing extinction. Uh, there is a kind of linguistic, apartheid which is taking place. And we have non-scheduled languages such as Mundari, Ho, Khariya, Korku, Bhumji, Khasi, Gabda, Murmi, Magara, Lepcha, Naga, Lushai, Mikir, Dafla, Khamti, Ebor, Savara. These are a few examples of the languages which are not in the scheduled group. Now we come to the exact, the scenario of language endangerment. Now this is the crucial state, or this is, the actual issue which needs to be discussed. We know that we are all gifted with the faculty to communicate, and if we don't speak a language, if we don't speak our mother tongues, then the language won't exist. So a language is endangered when it is on a path towards extinction. So without, enough documentation or without creating enough record, a language cannot, be revived. Now, what we can do as linguists, we can, revive the language by doing proper documentation, by creating records in the form of sounds or, some written record or so. And that's what documentary linguists are doing. So, as far as the language endangerment is concerned, so we as linguists should work for the revival of the language, because language is in danger when the speakers cease to use it. And what they do is they use it in an increasingly reduced number of communicative domains and cease to pass it on from one generation to the next. And that is what I say, that there are no speakers left to speak the language. The data shows that in most regions, about 90% of the languages must be replaced by the dominant languages by the end of the 21st century. And we have been seeing how the leading languages are dominating around the world. So before I actually go deep into the topic, I also want to talk about the levels of endangerment. So according to Cross, the linguist, there's a framework for classifying languages according to viability. So we have, certain terminologies like we have stable, unstable language, definitely endangered, severely endangered, critically endangered, and extinct. Now, what happens? Let me just give the description also. So, in case of the stable language, all the speakers speak the language. In case of unstable language, some children speak the language. Then we have definitely endangered language, where what happens, it is spoken by one parental generation and up. Then we have the severely endangered language, which is spoken only by grandparental generation. Then we have critically endangered language, which is spoken only by very few, of great grandparental generation. And then we have extinct language group, where no speakers are left to speak the language. So this is a framework. So even there are, levels as far as endangerment is concerned. Uh, Again, this is, the scenario of India's disappearing languages. So the UNESCO report says that any language that is spoken by less than 10,000 people is potentially endangered. And we find that even after the 1971 census, which is quite old, in India, the government decided that any language spoken by 10,000, less than 10,000 people need not be included in the official list of languages. And in India, all the languages that are spoken by less than 10,000 people are treated by the state as not worthy of mention. And they are treated by UNESCO as potentially endangered. So out of 780 languages in India, almost 600 will find that 600 languages are potentially endangered. Okay, so I'm talking about the census of 1991 and 2001, how they show not more than 122 languages. So most of the languages have been called potentially endangered. And I've given some examples over here, like Vadari, Kolhati, Gola, and Gisari. These are languages of nomadic people staying in Maharashtra, regions of Karnataka, and even in areas of Telangana. Then we have tribal languages also like Pori, Korku, Haldi, and Mavchi. In Assam, we have Moran, Tangsa, and Aitan. I also talked about Aitan before. So we can see that there are almost about 250 languages that have disappeared in the last 60 years. And languages disappear due to various reasons. Maybe the speakers are, they don't speak the language. And there's some other reasons also why languages disappear. So I've also mentioned about the Bo language in Andaman disappeared in 2010, and the Majhi language in Sikkim disappeared in 2015. Now, when we talk about the degree of endangerment, so we always also emphasize on this issue of intergenerational language transmission. So I'll just tell you, like, for example, when we talk about the degree of endangerment, we use the word safe. And as far as the intergenerational language transmission is concerned, the language is spoken by all generations in case of the safe language. So there the intergenerational transmission is uninterrupted. Then we have vulnerable. As my topic is the vulnerable languages. So the vulnerable group where most children speak the language, but it may be restricted to certain domains. And most adults and children are speakers. But what happens that the speakers are there, but there's a very slowly the speakers diminish. So this happens in the case of vulnerable group. Then we have definitely endangered, where children no longer learn the language as the mother tongue in the home. Then we have severely endangered. Now, what happens in case of severely endangered? The language is spoken by grandparents and older generations. While the parent generation, we understand it, they do not speak it to children or among themselves. Then we have critically endangered. The younger speakers are grandparents and older, and they speak the language partially and infrequently. And then we have the last group, which is extinct. That simply means that there are no speakers left to speak the language. So this is how the degree of endangerment works. Now, these are the list of some almost more than 80 languages which are in a state of vulnerability within the Indian subcontinent. So I'll just read these languages so that you are aware. So we have Adi, Anal, Angami, Angika. Well, Angika is a language spoken in the state of Bihar, in the eastern zone of India. We have Ao, Apatani, Balti, Bangani, Bhumji, Vishnupuri, Vishnupriya, Manipuri, Bodo. These are some languages of the northeast. Bokar, Chang, Chokri. Again, Chokri is spoken in the northeastern area. Dimasa, Galo, Garwali, Gondi, Gutob, Hamar, Ho, Rangkhol, Irula, Kabui, Karbi, Khamti, Khariya. Some of these languages are the Austroasiatic or belong to the Austroasiatic group also. Keza, Khiamgan, Khoirao, Koda, Kokborok, Konyak, Korku, Korwa, Kui, Maoni, Puruk, Kachi, Ladakhi, Lotha, Liangmai, Manchad, Mao, Maram, Maring, Miyu, Minyong, Mizo, Mundari, Zeme, Nokte, Nurangkhme, Nishi, which is again a language spoken that belongs to the Tibeto-Burman group. Padam, Padri, Paite, Fom, Pochuri, Purik, Rabha, Rengma, Rongpo, Sangtam, Sherudukpen, Sherpa, Simi, Sora, Spiti, Tagin, Tamang, Tangkul, Tangsa, Taruang, Tawang, Thado, Shangla, Tulu, Saurashtra, Wancho, Yimchungru, and Zeme. So I gave you the idea of the endangerment, the degrees of endangerment, and then I also showed you the list of the vulnerable languages existing within the Indian subcontinent. Now, what is to be done next? Okay, so in any way, these languages might, come in, the might face extinction in future, because if this is the same state going on, then there might come a time when, the speakers there are, the speakers completely don't speak that language due to some reason or the other, due to migration or some other factor. So what we can do as linguists, or as language supporters or language enthusiasts, we can preserve the language. Now, the next thing which I'm going to discuss, okay, that is language preservation and why it is important, how can we do that. So it is a fact, of course, that when language dies, it dies because the speakers are not there, and the speaker dies, the language also dies. So language preservation is done because it's an effort to prevent languages from becoming unknown. Otherwise, all the languages will vanish if there are no speakers left to speak the language. And a language is at risk of being lost when it no longer is taught to younger generations, while fluent speakers of the language usually die. So it is important to preserve native tongues, and that is why we always say, as language teachers or language enthusiasts, to speak your mother tongue, hold on to it. You must also make use of your native tongues, and that's why we always believe that as a person we can switch languages from one domain to the other. So preservation is important, and the goal of preserving native languages is to save indigenous languages. As to save indigenous languages is crucial to ensure the protection of the cultural identity and dignity of indigenous people and safeguard their traditional heritage. As we know that with language goes culture also. So if we are saving a language, we are also saving the traditional heritage of people also. Now, again, these are some figures which says that almost around 6,000 languages of the world, we can say that these languages are used in multiple domains of interaction, and we have various domains like school, work, marketplace, and many others. Now, in India, less than 5% of languages are well resourced. And it is through the subdiscipline of linguistics called documentary linguistics that the challenge of preserving linguistic diversity can be fought. We have few names in India, such as Professor Ganesh Devi, Professor Kavita Rastogi, Professor Anvita Abid, who have worked to revitalize endangered languages, and a lot of work is being going on. Now, the need to preserve India's linguistic diversity. So we have a scheme for protection and preservation of endangered languages. We have SPPEL, and this was instituted by Ministry of Human Resource Development. And the main objective of the scheme is to document and archive the country's languages that have become endangered or likely to be endangered in the near future. And this scheme is monitored by Central Institute of Indian Languages, which is located in Mysuru in Karnataka. So that's a very famous place for the regional languages, or a lot of languages are being taught, or linguistics is being taught, and a lot of research takes place in this institute. So the scheme is basically getting monitored over there. University Grants Commission provides financial assistance for creation of centers for endangered languages at central and state universities to undertake research projects. Now, what are the different ways through which we can celebrate linguistic diversity? When we talk about linguistic diversity, what are the different ways through which we can celebrate linguistic diversity? So I have just mentioned a few of the ways over here. So we can investigate language family trees. We can read and write bilingual poems. We can encourage independent reading in other languages. We can explore the root of words. However, there are other ways also. These are some ways I have just mentioned. So, we saw the different, language families. We saw the different levels of, linguistic, you can say, endangerment. We also saw, the different vulnerable languages which are from different regions within the Indian subcontinent. And we also saw, how, efforts are being done to promote or revitalize, the languages which are dead, or some ways through which we can, actually protect our language. So when we conclude this, I also want to say that as a linguist, I always say that, you know, uh, no language is pure or impure. Admixture of various races and communities gave rise to mixed languages, responsible for the genesis of modern Indian languages. So, linguistic diversity is a part and parcel of the diversity of life in nature and culture. So, any loss in linguistic diversity is a loss in the vitality and resilience of the whole web of life. And the high linguistic diversity is because of several human migrations from various parts of the world. And of course, migration is a very important factor, and adapting and adopting the local population and its languages. So India has a legacy of bi and multilingualism, and Indian linguistic diversity has been sustained because of its functional bilingualism, which allows each language to maintain its identity and thrive at its own pace while interacting in a complex social network. Now, the main feature of Indian bilingualism is that our languages are not competitive but complementary. It's a very important fact. And children are also, equipped with this latent knowledge when they enter school. So this multiplicity of languages has taught us social cohesion and tolerance for others. And of course, diversity is a major mantra for human evolution and sustenance. And when we talk about language diversity, we are actually, we are, strengthening people's or communities' cultural heritage and therefore their identity. And as I have given in the quote, that people who speak more than one language possess improved cognitive abilities and educational outcomes. The death of language is the death of the soul. So, with that, I come to the end of my talk. And thank you, everybody, for being a part of this session.